Cravings for food, drugs, shopping, gambling, internet, cigarettes, alcohol. What happens when they get out of control? Cravings. We all have them. A milk chocolate candy bar, a cold beer on a hot day, a friendly game of penny poker. But at what point can our innocent cravings become a problem, a compulsion, even an addiction? The cravings at the heart of our habits. This week on My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. When it comes to cravings, whether they're simple impulsive desires or full-blown addictions, there's one thing they all have in common. They all aim at satisfying our brain's pleasure center. Our brains naturally emit signals telling us when our bodies are low in feel-good chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, endorphins. These signals drive us to do things that will satisfy the chemical deficiencies through healthy means such as exercise and sleep, and through destructive means such as nicotine, sugar, even pain. The difficulty arises when your chemicals are controlling you. This week, my colleague Elizabeth Atkins takes an in-depth and candid look at this control question with Vicki Griffin, who shares the story of how her personal cravings nearly destroyed her.
Vicki, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you.
You have an amazing story, a complicated history of unhealthy habits, addictions, and an inspiring journey back to really good health. So let's begin with your childhood and your family and the significant events that formed you.
Well, quite a few of them, I'd say. I came from a very violent home, and my father left home when I was young. And so my recollection of having a safe environment was pretty well non-existent. We were a busy home, very productive, and yet it was very chaotic. And I believe that had an effect on me. My mother suffered from some mental health conditions, I believe, and my father left home as a result when I was quite young. So I witnessed a lot of violence, and I was also the recipient of a lot of violence. So I think I learned an attitude quite young to just cut and run, and or fight, either one of those two reactions. And so I started running away from home when I was quite young. I believe the first time I ran away, I was 5. And of course I didn't have very far I could go, but it set a pattern and a mindset of how to deal with challenges, and that wasn't a good choice. And so that was my earliest beginnings.
So what was your thought process when you were witnessing all of these things?
I just thought, you don't think a lot when you're that age. You're just afraid and you want to get away from it, and you don't want to be that way. I remember thinking, I don't want to be that way. I would run across the street to the cow pasture, and I'd climb a tree, and I would see the cows nurturing their babies, and I'd think, I don't want to be that. I want to be this. And it was a prayer, really. I didn't recognize it as such at the time, but I had a pattern set at that young age, and it was quite brutal.
So you went back home, and then what happened? Please take us through the years, your teen years.
Well, we moved to a more urban area. My father left home shortly thereafter, and I was left with the violent parent. And so I started running away and getting into serious trouble by age 11. I started acting out, and I fell in with a group in junior high. And at the same time, my mother, wanted me to succeed. She wanted me to do well. I was tall. So she very early put me in modeling school. And so I wanted to be perfect. I didn't want to make mistakes. I wanted everything to be just right. And so but I did not have the recipe or tools for handling any kind of conflict. And so I started walking in an attitude of abandonment and rejection and anger. And that's a really toxic combination to have. And so at age 11, I was already smoking and taking drugs, and particularly stimulants, amphetamines. And I developed an eating disorder, bulimia. I was bulimic for 20 years, from age 11 to age 31.
Age 11?
Yes.
That's 6th grade.
Yes, and they didn't have a name for it at that time, and I didn't understand it. It was a compulsion. It wasn't something that I wanted or planned, but in striving to be thin and happy and perfect, and of course the media influence didn't help, and the unstable environment, and no monitoring. My mother had to work till late at night, and I had a list of things that I had to get done every day. So I did not have an experience of doing normal, healthy things in school, high school, plays, proms, band, after-school activities. I had things that I had to accomplish in order to keep my mother calm. And so I ran away from home in earnest when I was 17. That was the time. And I was very scholastic. I got good grades because when I would run away, I would really try to escape and find places to hide or someone to live with, someone that would take me. But of course it was ridiculous, and in those days there were no facilities for this type of thing. And so I would hide in libraries, and I still get a very warm feeling when I drive by libraries. I think they're amazing places. So my grades were very good, and I think librarians are amazing people because they keep control of the environment. So it all worked for my good eventually, but not at the moment. At the moment it was bad, and so when I was 17, I ran away for good. I was supposed to be going to an appointment for advanced placement to a university. And it wasn't my lack of trying that was driving this. I was reading books. I was trying to understand. I was trying to get better. I read William James Psychology when I was in the 7th grade. I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, but I had no self-control. I had no ability to navigate through life.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Wellness Center has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan.
They get a chance to know that somebody's on their team.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel. We feel like I'm the only one, but that is so untrue.
Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Working through my problems and seeing that I'm not the only one that has to cope has really brought me to a place where now it's okay to talk about it.
Because if you keep stuff to yourself, you can't overcome. We all need one another.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
Addiction, the basis of it is a craving that gets created by dopamine, one of the neurochemicals that is a part of a reward system. And that craving leads us to become so compulsive about this that we will do almost anything in order to keep it going.
So being so young, how did you manage on your own, and what was your life like then?
Well, it was out of control, and it was bad. I was a hard worker, so I worked, but I was with bad people. There are bad people out there. And I was not very nice myself. And so people do what they know. They solve problems with the tools that they have.
Can you give us some specifics? You weren't a nice person, there were bad people.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
I guess that does mean a lot of different things to different people.
Yeah.
Well, I have come to the conclusion that it requires about 3 attitudes to fail in life. And one of them is self-pity, and I had a pretty good dose of that, ingratitude, and an attitude of entitlement. So I was not respectful. I defied authority. Breaking the law meant nothing to me. I only wanted to, I didn't care about myself or anyone else, although I was very sensitive, which is a pretty typical kind of victim mentality where you're very wounded, but at the same time you're very self-absorbed. And so this is a pattern. So shifting that pattern of thinking and the pattern of lifestyle to my life doesn't have meaning, I don't have hope, I don't care, I just want what's good for me, to there is hope, there's meaning, there's purpose, and let's think about other people. That's a huge paradigm shift. And that's what I needed to experience but did not have at that time. At that time, I was throwing up 12 times a day. I was about 25 pounds thinner than I am right now. I was taking drugs and smoking and using a lot of amphetamines. And so I had no desire to live. I was suicidal, yes, at that point. I felt very rejected. I'm very sad to say that when I would call my father and ask for him to help me and rescue me, he would just say, you know, all you ever do is complain. And so it reinforced this idea that I was quite abandoned and left in a very dangerous situation without much help. So it reinforced this pattern of acting out and running away, and I made terrible choices. So there's this mix of environment and the genetic liabilities and then our choices. So all of those things play a part, and they certainly did in my case.
Did you have any kind of support network?
I have to say no. The support network that I had were people that had the same problems I did. And so one of the most important shifts that occurred in my life was after my mother passed away. I had a scholarship to go to a university where none of those people were. And so breaking away from all of those destructive social connections was a very positive step for me. And so even though I still had the bulimia, as I had mentioned before, I had it for 20 years. I wasn't partying anymore or using drugs, but I still had an eating disorder. That was my main addiction. I had an altered biology as a result of these choices all these years. I didn't know it then, but I know it now, that this whole chemistry of cravings, the architecture of my brain, the choices and thoughts that I had were sculpted by my experiences and by my choices and by my emotions. And so all of that needed a makeover.
At Team Wellness Dental Clinics, you'll find plenty to smile about. Our friendly professional dentists and hygienists are here to give you the full range of preventative and remedial care you need for a beautiful, lasting smile. From diagnostics to routine cleanings, our team does it all, right in your neighborhood. So whether you come to us or we come to you, you'll get the kind of dental care you need to keep smiling. Team Wellness Dental Clinics, now serving communities all over Metro Detroit.
My job was causing me so much stress.
I felt disconnected and frightened.
I felt so isolated.
I was beginning to feel trapped, depressed. I never expected that to happen to me.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel, but that is so untrue.
It's good to be able to talk about it.
I was able to seek help. I found it from Team Wellness.
It's a sense of freedom.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
So on top of this physical re-education of the brain that is causing us to chase after this constant craving, to fulfill it because of the pleasure center's need for that dopamine, we also can have these triggered by where we live, who we hang out with, especially the largest risk factor for creating this addiction is who you spend time with. It actually provokes a physical stimulant in the brain to go after that craving again. Gambling, food, sexual addictions. There's all kinds of things that people get attached to that begin to take over their life, including making physical changes in their brain.
There was an internal brokenness, an internal emotional, social, spiritual brokenness, and a physiology now. There's a physiology of cravings. So all of those things were working in tandem with one another to create this vicious cycle of dependency and addiction.
So Vicki, please walk us through the sequence of events as you were growing up to help us understand how these cravings triggered this self-destructive and out-of-control behavior.
Well, I suppose if I were to use one term to describe my mental and physical state growing up, it would be starved. So I was starved. I was starved for security and for true nurture. I was starved for meaning, and because of the environment of the modeling thing that I was put into, then I began to starve physically. I began to associate being perfect in every way with somehow this would gain success or happiness. And of course that is not true. None of that is true. And so when we have these ideas and expectations that are unrealistic, it is a very heavy weight on a very thin string. And so everything I attempted was dismantled and ended in ruin. And it was all a quest for peace, stability, and happiness, and relationships. And none of those things, when you have an attitude of self-pity and you're desperate and you don't know how to resolve any kind of conflict, then you really don't have the equipment for even forming good relationships. And so the healing needs to take place at every level of our lives. And fortunately, that is available to every person.
But before that happened to you, you really spiraled to what could have been a point of no return. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. After my mother passed away, I was going to university. I was actually had a major in social work and did child abuse investigations of all things. But I was suicidal by that point because I did not want to do this thing. I have not yet met the person that gets up in the morning and says, you know, I think I want to fail everything on my list. I don't meet those kinds of people. I meet a lot of people who don't have the tools or the power to do what's right. And I was one of those people. And so I had no reason to want to live. There was nothing out there. And so that is where I was when my life began to change in a better direction.
You at one point had said you were in a battle for your brain. Can you talk about that?
I was in a battle for my brain. Yes, the battle is for the brain. And my brain, what I wanted to do, I did not do. What I did not want to do, I did do. And if that isn't a battle for the brain, I don't know what is. And what we say in our programs now is that the addicted brain is fighting hard, but we need to fight smart. And that's what I had to learn how to do.
So obviously you're much healthier now. Can you tell us at what point did things change and how did that happen?
Yes, well, at the point where my need was the greatest, I believe the change began. I was in very poor state emotionally and very driven, but hungry all the time and underweight, quite underweight. I was doing pretty well at school. However, in my school program, I actually met my future husband there, Dane, and he was just a wonderful person. Although at that time he was a distracted, out of control person as well, young person in a party mode, not focused on larger priorities. Living a careless life is the way I would like to put it. So he was attracted to me. So it sort of took us out of circulation, which was a good thing. Well, we fell in love and we married, and he did not know that I was bulimic. All the other habits had fallen away, but I hid this. I was so ashamed of this habit. And one time, my school was progressing well, his school was progressing well, and we had a baby. I was bulimic through my pregnancy, which is pretty incredible. And we were fairly miserable because we did not understand bigger picture and the bigger meaning of our lives. We didn't understand how to live a better life, although we wanted that. We wound up going to some meetings, and in that meeting, I was already involved in a master's degree program in public administration. And I was getting ready to open up a series of clinics, free clinics, through some churches. And one of the dentists who was going to provide a facility invited us to come to his home for some meetings. And there was a pastor there who preached some meetings. And at those meetings, we found and discovered faith and hope and spiritual renewal in a way that we had not experienced before. We experienced it together as a couple. And I like to think of the saying of Mencius, the Chinese sage. He says, knowledge imparts information, but not the power to execute. And that is where I was. My chemistry, my biology, my brain, my habits had all gone south. They were all corrupted. My conscience was not awakened to my true condition. But at that meeting, I discovered what I really was. I saw myself as not just a victim, but I saw myself as a selfish, self-centered person that was out of control, that had a bad attitude. Those three attitudes that make the perfect criminal: self-pity, entitlement, and ingratitude. And I experienced forgiveness, I experienced spiritual renewal, so did my husband. And it's really interesting that out of our 32-year amazing marriage, 28 of those years have been in full-time work and ministry.
Wow.
What a turnaround.
Yes.
I'm very, very grateful for that. And immediately, I knew that there were some steps that I needed to take. And immediately, I became interested in the science of the brain-body connection. Addictions are very isolating, and people who have addictions do not take care of themselves, and they don't take care of their relationships, and they are spiritually impoverished, and they do not have thinking skills. I had none of those tools, and I had a very fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is a mindset that has no recipe for healing problems. They see themselves as either smart or dumb, a success or a failure, winners or losers. And as a result, that mindset tends to be more anxious, more critical, less forgiving. They don't know how to deal with challenges, problems, and mistakes. But making mistakes is part of life. It's part of learning. And this became part of our work and part of our ministry through these many years. And I work now with scientists and addiction specialists, and I have my own degrees in nutrition and public administration in this new work that we have. But this began a journey and a process of learning how to live the daily life in a successful and balanced way. And the cravings, the addiction went away.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Wellness Center has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan.
No one should ever have to feel so alone.
Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Despite what you've been through, you can overcome.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
You're bad.
What are you doing?
You're worthless. What are you doing? Don't trust it. Don't trust that hurt you. You're worthless. It's pointless.
Where are they?
Look at you. You can't hide. You have to go. Where are they?
When the pain of schizophrenia meets hope, everything can change. Give someone who's struggling the help they desperately need. Your support of the National Alliance on Mental Illness funds programs and support groups that can transform a life. Be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind,
a show that dares to talk about mental health matters that touch nearly every family. Each week, you'll meet guests who share their stories, hear from local experts, and learn about resources that may help.
And so I was in a committee meeting at the House of Representatives when I realized that my daughter had autism.
We need to take the stigma away from mental health issues.
No topics about mental health and wellness are off limits on our show.
Let's talk about it on My Healthy Mind.
But it turns out that it is possible in order for you to be able to escape this loop. You have to have hope. You have to believe that it's possible. You have to finally admit to yourself that you have this problem and that it's got control of you. And aligning yourself with Great Spirit, with Higher Spirit, seems to really give people a real edge to be able to have the hope and the strength and the courage to change this very difficult pattern. So it may sound bleak that this process has got a hold of you and you are hopelessly under control of this process. So the truth of it is, we are made as human beings for a second chance and for renewal. Even if you have to use a third chance and a fourth chance, don't give up. There's always hope for those who will not give up. If you persevere and you have the courage to proceed with changing not only your habits, but which will then eventually help you change the actual inner workings of your brain chemistry so that you are now able to be more free from the tyranny of this control system and now are the master of your own life.
So I began to see, well, there is hope, there is faith, there is renewal. It is outside of myself, it is available to me. And who wouldn't want that? Mm-hmm. And I did want that. All of this has now played to do something good instead of being part of the problem in society. And I'm thankful for that.
Thank you for joining us today on this fascinating and emotional journey of discovery into the cravings at the heart of our habits. If you'd like to talk or read about this or any mental health issue, please reach out to us on our website, myhealthymind.com, through Twitter at myhealthymind, or on Facebook. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it.